Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are taking a look at the Robert Pattinson, Bong Joon Ho sci-fi dark comedy Mickey 17, based on the novel Mickey 7. It's about a hapless young man who signs up to be an expendable and basically goes through, well, a more grisly version of Groundhog Day. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe. We are slowly growing our numbers, so if you can just show some love, spread the word about the channel, and hit that subscribe button. We'd greatly appreciate that. And we're always pumping out new content, so if you're subscribed, you're in the know. Lee, so we saw this movie a few weeks ago, and we did a trailer reaction like last month. And at that time, when we were doing our discussion about Mickey 17, as the trailer showed, we were curious about what this movie was going to be like, and we both lauded it for having some originality to it, where most movies are either going for the Marvel or DC playbook or doing something that is related to retelling someone's life. This kind of thought outside of the box, and
it broke the mold.
Yeah, and being a Bong Joon Ho film, I mean, obviously it's going to take things to the extreme, as we've seen in movies like Snowpiercer and Parasite. So why don't you go ahead and take us into Mickey 17 with Robert Pattinson?
Yeah, and we saw the trailer. Did we initially saw that? We saw it in Gladiator 2, right?
Was that right? And then we did the trailer reaction probably like a month ago.
Yeah. So I was trying to remember how we kind of got focused on this, and I think it was in Gladiator 2 that we watched. So, so the film, I think we'll kind of break it down just chronologically how it happens, as opposed to, I guess, how the movie does it, just to kind of make things a little bit.
I will say this: neither one of us have read the book, so we're going into this just from the movie point of view.
Yeah. I can safely say I did know it was adapted upon a book. I have no idea anything about it. The fact that you're saying Mickey 7 and not Mickey 17 makes me wonder why there's such a stark difference, or if this covers like some other clone of his. But I don't know, and I guess that'll be something for somebody else to tell us. So, so the movie takes place in the super futuristic and distant time of 2054. We get to see our I'm going to say hero, Mickey Barnes and his friend Timo, who are living on Earth, and they seem to have gotten into a little bit of an issue with a loan shark that likes to see people get disembodied. Kind of a very weird thing, I guess, and I that shouldn't surprise me, because a lot of things in this movie are just weird. For both of them, so for Mickey and his friend Timo, they're interested in trying to pretty much escape this loan shark. So they decide, like, hey, we're going to go on this trip to, or I guess we're going to go on this voyage to this planet called Niflheim. As you point out, Mickey becomes something called an expendable. Now, I like how you kind of describe Mickey. You described him as hapless. And I think that's a very good way of describing him, because, like, as we get to know this character, he is, I hate to use this term, I'm just going to use it. He's very pathetic, right? Like, he absolutely seems like someone that would he's very, like, meek. He's obviously he's just a follower, right? Because you kind of get the hint that his friend Timo was the one that kind of got him into, like, kind of doing all this stuff with the loan shark, and it wasn't really Mickey's idea. It was his, friends, and he kind of escapes the planet with him, but, his friend Timo is kind of a douchebag to him. So it's very weird, because, like, when you follow a film, right, you really want to kind of jive with the main character, but the main character, this is kind of like sad to watch and follow. So what did you think about Mickey as you got to get to know his character better?
I mean, if you think about it, his situation is kind of the epitome of who he is as a person, right? I mean, the fact that he's sad and pathetic and kind of a doormat kind of reflects, who he is, who he is as a person, what his situation is in life. Um, it kind of reminds me of Eeyore the donkey in a way, because he has that sad disposition. And I'm trying to think of a character in pop culture where, if anything can go wrong, does go wrong for him. But I'll also say at the same time, like he's one of those characters who's just so pathetic, like you can't help but root for the guy,
Yes.
because
Yes.
it's like one guy can't endure like all this shit. Like at some point he's gotta win, right? He can't be a perpetual loser over and over again, because we see throughout the movie they basically put him through the ringer. They like subject him to all these to all these tests, from like exposures to viruses to having his limbs cut off, and and each time each time he dies, they people just casually say, oh well, I'll see you tomorrow, man, like it's no big deal.
Yeah.
I will also say too, it's kind of he's kind of a metaphor for how how there really is no originality, right? Everything is a clone, everything is a copy, and we've just become so used to it, we don't really put too much thought about what we're looking at anymore. It's kind of, and as I was watching the movie, it kind of reminded me of a thought experiment. Have you ever heard of the ship of Theseus experiment?
Nope, definitely not.
All right, so basically, you start off with the ship, right? A wooden ship. But as time progresses, obviously wooden ships, they fall apart. So so each time you have like a rotten plank or something, you replace it and keep going forward, right? The question is, at what point is the ship still the original ship if all of the parts are just made of replacements? So at what point is Mickey Barnes, right? Because they said over and over again, they basically have like this little box that they stick in his head, which basically uploads all of the memories and experiences that he's had into the new body. So he kind of carries on like he's the original, but you kind of have to wonder at that point, by the time you get to clone number 17, is that really Mickey Barnes, or is that just some facsimile who's kind of been programmed to believe he is Mickey Barnes? Because that's a classic trip of sci-fi whenever they have to deal with clones like that. It's that question of the people around who know the original person try their best to kind of accommodate the clone, but the clone kind of has doubts of his own. It's like, well, am I really that person, or am I really me? And we kind of see that later on when Mickey 17 encounters Mickey 18, and we begin to see sort of divergence in who we see from, I guess, the original Mickey, who's this like meek, mild-mannered, pathetic, sad sack of a loser, and his clone Mickey 18, who is a bit of a douche, really.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting, right? And you brought up a very interesting thing, and I was trying to recall in the film, right? And I apologize, I didn't get an opportunity to kind of like rewatch this because I think the digital release is in like a few weeks from now. So
yeah.
Didn't have an opportunity to go back, but if I recall correctly, and you please tell me if I remember this wrong or not, I thought that when he was replicated, right, as a clone, it pretty much like captured everything of his essence, but it was really weird that for Mickey 18, he obviously comes across as like a totally different type of personality.
He's very individual. He's far more assertive than the previous iterations. Yeah, and that's the thing that kind of made me scratch my head, because up until that point, because we meet the original Mickey Barnes, and he kind of sets the stage for what we can expect from his clones going forward. He's very much the sad figure who kind of just allows himself to be treated in such a way because he's got no other options in life. So my thing is that was there some sort of subconscious thought that kind of got stored in the memory bank that kind of came to the surface, where it was like, I'm done with this shit. Like I'm done having my limbs cut off. I'm done being stuck in a box and pumped with viruses. I'm done with all that stuff.
Exactly. And that was the part that was really interesting to me, because I was trying to figure out like where in this movie do I feel like that exact moment would have happened, right? Because I think we see him, he's just constantly just like kind of treated like this, and then you have this different personality come out of him, and it just shows like maybe it's this, I guess, vision of what Mickey wants himself to be, right? He doesn't want to be the doormat, but
But I will say this. I mean, to use a classic example, we get Bruce Banner and the Hulk, right? We know Bruce Banner to be very much a mild-mannered, neat kind of guy who wouldn't hurt a fly, but then he has a suppressed rage that kind of manifests itself into this, giant green monster that we call the Hulk. I kind of feel like that attitude has always been in there, but he's sort of found a way to suppress it up until a point. Right?
I see.
That's what I think might have happened, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but I'm assuming there might have been some sort of like technology or technique to kind of repress any of those negative thoughts, because they do go out of their way to kind of say, we don't want people thinking for themselves. I mean, we want them to listen to our leader, aka Mark Ruffalo with big teeth. And I guess somewhere along the line they either overlooked it or malfunctioned, and those suppressed thoughts kind of came to the surface.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about that a little later. But thank you. Yeah, we won't get too much in the weeds at this stage. So, but the other thing I just really wanted to talk about very quickly, and we, before we started taping, we kind of briefly brought this up. What about Robert Pattinson's performance? Right? I mean, I think he plays both these characters, right? Both versions of himself. And I think he does a pretty good job. I want to give the guy some props, right? Because I know, I think that stigma of, being the Twilight guy, right, has probably followed him for some time. But he certainly has shown a very real capability to actually be an actor, right? A true actor. And I think I've seen him in some stuff, like we've seen him in Batman and some other stuff. But I think this one, I was impressed, right? I think he did a good job of showing this like character who has, kind of this like really meek, gentle kind of like doesn't want to like ruffle any feathers. And then he, kind of when we get the clone out for Mickey 18, he's this very stark contrast where he's, super assertive. He's kind of like grizzly. He has like no problem just like murdering people for the sake of it because like he just is impulsive like that. So I thought it was very interesting. So what do you think about Pattinson's performance?
For me, it's the voice, because whenever you're developing a character, you start out with the voice, and how you develop the voice will let you know how the character is going to be portrayed. And I really liked the way that he kind of created that voice for Mickey Barnes. And I think he said himself he kind of patterned it off of Steve Buscemi's character in Fargo, which is perfect because Steve Buscemi kind of plays a sort of pathetic figure as well. So it's kind of a nice callback. But yeah, like if you pay attention to the way that that Mickey's 17 and 18 talk, Mickey 17's got more of this like whiny kind of, almost like childlike, nuance, whereas Mickey 18 has more of a rough, assertive, kind of aggressive, like don't bother me with the details kind of thing. So I think what he did in developing a voice for both of these guys kind of sets the stage on how we can perceive both of them. Not as I guess you could say two sides of the same coin, but I would say almost two distinct individuals who just happen to look alike and share the same DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would say for, I guess, as far as like our journey goes, right? Because we got Mickey, right? So they're on this crew, and he develops this romantic relationship, right, with the security officer. Her name was Nasha, and I like how there's some good scenes in there, right? And I want to talk a little bit about Nasha, right? I don't really, talk a lot about couples and the romance. But this one was what I was kind of interested to get your take on it, because I had a very different take on it. So we see Nasha, right? And, she kind of falls for Mickey. And I think like falling for a guy like Mickey 17, right? Not trying to throw any shade at anybody, right? But, seems like maybe a hard guy to have a relationship with, right? Just with like kind of his demeanor and everything. But we see some kind of like good moments, right? And you mentioned like for Mickey, right? When they get to Niflheim, they're kind of doing these experiments where they kind of send him out there, and he's just kind of like just breathing in everything, and he's breathing in like all the germs, and they, kind of have a humorous scene of like telling him like, hey, you're just gonna sit there and just breathe up all the bad things that are outside. And they, kind of bring him in, and it just kind of shows like they had that scene where Nasha is just kind of like there with him as he's dying, and it was touching, right, to see, right, just even though she understands that he is expendable and this is just kind of a clone of him, it was good to see kind of like this character do that. With that being said, though, right, I legitimately thought she was gonna be in on something with the cloning. Like, I thought that she was like a plant, or she was kind of there to like either be a part of like the experiment, or like she was a part of the joke, or she was like working for somebody else. There were so many things that went through my head, but then at the end of it, she was just really just into him. So I don't know. I was curious, did you feel anything weird with the romance, or like did you just kind of take it in stride, or did you have any weird thoughts like me where you thought that there was something maybe more sinister going on with her character?
I mean, honestly, I thought I wasn't thinking that at all. I was just thinking she genuinely cared about him. I would say she was kind of maternal towards him, because you kind of get the feeling this is a guy who probably hasn't had the best life. He's probably been like this since he was a kid, and he does reference the fact that he feels responsible for what happened to his mother, the car accident. So her kind of providing the love that he needs is a sort of surrogacy that he's been lacking all of his life. Yeah, I mean I didn't think anything suspicious of her whatsoever.
Okay. I guess that was just me then. I guess I was going for very darker maybe outlook on it. Where
you kind of went overboard on that one right there.
Yes, I can clearly see that. I had some maybe alternative motives there, but hey, I'm glad Nasha was a good person to do it through. Definitely helps us kind of root for Mickey.
I mean, sometimes people can just love each other and there are no strings attached, Lee. I mean, come on.
Like I said, it was odd to me, and when you have like this dark comedy that I mean, he's such a punching bag for everything. In my head I was like, okay, this is gonna be just another thing that he's gonna lose. So
to be fair, I mean his quote unquote best friend treats him like shit. So you think anybody who comes into contact with him would kind of follow suit. So that I get that.
Yeah. So but yeah, so as they're in Niflheim, right? So Mickey 17, the actual clone, Mickey 17, the 17th clone, right? So is exploring the planet. It comes across these group of creepers, right? And they look like water bears, right?
Tardigrades.
Tardigrades. Yes, thank you. Yeah. So it looked a lot like that. I remember when I first saw it, I'm like, that looks really familiar. And it kind of, unfortunately, not to talk about South Park again, but they have done that in the past with the water bears or the tardigrades. So kind of was amusing to see them, like, I guess, on screen like this, just because of that. But yeah, so he's like, investigating kind of this like area. He ends up falling in there, and his good old buddy Timo finds him and pretty much leaves him for dead. And kind of, I guess, reports back that he is dead. But the creepers, as we call them, they actually saved Mickey 17's life, which was, kind of I don't know, it's weird because, how do I describe them? They're not very warm and cuddly, right? Like they're hard to kind of look at, but I think they kind of do like a good job of making us feel bad for the creepers, because they're kind of like this like very kind of like wholesome, like they have like a large community. They all come together when bad things happen. And physically they're hard to look at, but I think like they have this kind of, I don't know, you kind of feel emotionally engaged in the creepers. So I give them props for trying to like have that happen. And we have Mickey 17 as he like returns. We find out that they cloned him thinking he was dead. So now there's a Mickey 17, and they now have a Mickey 18 clone. And this is kind of where I guess we really start kind of going here with, kind of the story, because really there's a, we kind of get this like flashback, or we get this like information told to us that there's a whole lot of issues when you have multiple clones. It's totally illegal, and there's a lot of like negative things that come about it. So you kind of see Mickey 18, and he just starts to try to murder Mickey 17. So once again, I give Robert Pattinson props for having to kind of play these dual characters where you're kind of having to show this and be able to do this stuff. But yeah, I did find it so, once again, I want to go back to what we talked about a little bit, which was, why is it that the personalities are so wildly different, right? Like, that kind of bugged me in this. I guess you want to kind of help show growth or try to have something like it. So if you have these two very passive characters, it's hard to like really do anything with it. Like, you're not going to create much of a story. Like, you need that tension. But it did feel very weird that, they had such stark personality changes compared to them. So did you have anything else you want to add about that? I really got hung up on why it seemed like these characters had to be so different. I mean, I understand from a story perspective why you want it, but like in the universe, I couldn't really follow it.
I mean, you probably might need to talk to a psychologist about that, but it could be that he might have a split personality.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there is some interesting things that you can kind of glean from this. Like, is it just, does he have like a different kind of persona? Does he, what is it like? Is he striving for? Like, how's it? I guess we'll never really know from that. But
I mean, here's my thing. Like, I mean, like if you have to undergo that kind of trauma, on a regular basis, at some point, it would make sense for you to kind of develop like a different persona to kind of cope with that. Because I mean, throughout the movie we see Mickey undergoing like the kind of trauma that would just freak anybody out, right? There's that one scene where he's out in space and I think he gets radiation poisoning. He sticks his hand out, and one of the satellites slices his hand off, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There are just so many. I mean, to undergo something like that day after day after day, I mean, how could you not find something to cope with? Even if you do have someone who, is being very maternal and very protective and caring of you, at some point you just start to think, I got to do something, or else I'm going to break completely.
Yeah, no, very, very true. There is some interesting thoughts that go into how that would happen. So. But yeah, so we have Mickey 17, Mickey 18. They're, kind of having this, big argument. So they end up kind of like, I guess, separating ways, so to say. And Mickey 17, he ends up winning this, I guess, dinner contest with the leaders of the expedition, who I guess we want to make sure we introduce now because, they've been kind of background characters, or we kind of know about them, but I think this is kind of the first really big interaction with them. So you have Kenneth Marshall, right, played by Mark Ruffalo, who's I'm going to say he's the leader, but it definitely feels like, what was it, Ifla, right, or Ifla? I don't even know how. Do you remember Toni Collette's character's name?
Yeah, it's Ifla, but I would say he's more. I would say he's more of the figurehead,
Correct.
rather
Yes.
than the leader. Yeah.
Yes. Correct. Yeah, I would say because you definitely get the vibe that she's the one that's maybe pulling, or the one that's kind of saying the stuff that needs to be heard. So he wins this, like I said, kind of dinner with them, and you see him like kind of eating this food. Ends up this was like an opportunity for them to test out like these painkillers on him, or they were trying to test something with the meat. So there was like a whole lot of different things going on in this sequence. And I guess this is as good a time as any. This is a dark comedy, right? How did the comedy work for you or not work for you? Because I think there's some parts of this where I kind of got some laughs, right? Like we see parts where he's, being cloned and, they forget to like set up the bed. He just kind of drops and hits the floor. Or, there is some like kind of like really offbeat dark humor in this. And like I said, I think this scene kind of really shows it, where they're like sitting there and they're just like trying to give him a whole bunch of painkillers. The painkillers don't work. And like they're worried about the rug on the floor. So like there's just all this stuff going on. And I was just curious, did you or did you not like the comedy of this?
I mean, you kind of have to tune yourself in to what they're doing here, but you can sort of appreciate where they're going.
Yeah.
It's this theater of the absurd, really. It's this idea that things can't be this madcap or this crazy. So you kind of have to laugh at it, but at the same time, I mean, and I think you mentioned this as well when we watched it. You do notice some parallels between what we see in the movie and what we see in real life.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, what could possibly happen if things went in that direction. I just think it's one of those things where you can't take it too seriously, because if you take it too seriously, then you end up like Mickey having to go apeshit crazy, and you end up like trying to attack people because you just can't cope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, comedy is one of those things where it's definitely going to differ from person to person, right? And I think your level of enjoyment in this will absolutely depend a lot upon if you like the comedy or not. Because everything else put aside, there wasn't a whole lot going on in the movie. So, at least for me personally, right, just my personal stake on it. But, I would say that that's going to kind of go a long ways with how much you like it. And what do you think about just Ruffalo and Colette's kind of, portrayals of these characters? Because, Ruffalo obviously really is hamming up the screen the whole time he's there. But, his character is obviously so absurd, you just have to kind of roll with it, with how over the top it is. Whereas Toni Collette, I think, does a much better job of just kind of being this like wife in the shadows that's pulling the strings type of thing. And I did find their characters to be fun, if not like totally over the top, which I get is the point of it. But God, they were so over the top. So what do you think about their performances for both those characters?
Well, to go back to what I said, it's a theater of the absurd, so everything does get exaggerated. If they were playing it very subtle, obviously that would change the tone of the movie. In a way, they're kind of forced to play it that way, because because if you're trying to keep up the fantasy or the pretense of it being a comedy, you kind of have to ham it up, because otherwise, because objectively this isn't a really funny situation. Nothing about it's funny. But the way that the characters, behave and react or overreact, it kind of lets us. It's kind of like a laugh track. It kind of lets us know this is the moment where you got to laugh, because it's just so outrageous,
Yeah, for sure. So, but yeah, it is, like I said, I do give them props for it. Like, it was just so ridiculous. I just had to kind of like soak it in and be like, God, like these are just like two characters that I feel like are 100% designed just to be that bizarre and out of place. So,
but obviously they're supposed to represent politicians, because politicians are narcissistic and vacuous individuals, really.
Yes, there definitely is some. Obviously, there's going to be some stuff that you can infer from a lot of what's happening, and they were at times, I would say, not very subtle with it either. So, So after this fun incident, right, we see Mickey 17, and he's talking with the Mickey 18 clone about that, and we see obviously the Mickey 18 clone being a lot more assertive or a lot more dominant, is obviously very pissed off that Mickey 17 just kind of rolled over, right? And he's pretty much like out there. He wants to kill Marshall, right? Mark Ruffalo's character. So he ends up going to this ceremony, but instead of them having an opportunity, or instead of Mickey 18 having an opportunity to kill Mark Ruffalo's character, a little baby creeper comes out of this like stone that they're trying to utilize, and this kind of exposes both the clones to everybody, right? So now the word is out that we got both these clones here, and we see the clones and Nosh are both arrested. And as we see this, we kind of see like all these creepers, they start coming out, and you kind of get to see like kind of the true scope of how many creepers are there. And there's tens of thousands of them, right? Like there's just so many of them that are existing there. And you can see that they're reacting to the fact that there's these, two babies on board. One of them was killed, but the other one is being held hostage, so to say, for that. And there was just this moment, right, that it just kind of totally creeped me out. and they were talking about like cutting off the creeper tails, right? And they were eating them, and I just had like this thought in my brain, like how like bad of a place do you have to be where you have this like random creature that you never seen before, and you're like cutting off their tails to like eat them. And it was just, I don't know. I just want to throw that out there. It was so bizarre to see. I don't know who did that. It kind of makes me wonder if maybe one of the Mickeys had done that at a certain stage where he was like, hey, we're going to test this out. Why don't we just eat this or something? But I don't know. It was just something that was weird to see. Like there was a lot about creeper tails, a lot more than I was expecting to see. I'm going to pause for a second. Did you have anything you want to say? I'm sorry. I know it's really weird at the end.
Well, the wife wanted to turn it into a spice. She didn't really want to eat it like,
sorry.
like a steak, but she wanted to like make it into, like some sort of like, I guess, like condiment or something for the food.
Sure. So thank you for specifying that. Like I said, I didn't get an opportunity to rewatch this and didn't recall. I just remember there's a lot about tails there near the end. I guess just to kind of continue with the absurdity. So, I guess the marshal decides like they want to send the Mickeys out there to, I guess, kind of talk with the creepers. Luckily for plot reasons, they have this device that is able to kind of communicate with them. So you have like the, Mickeys go out there and they're strapped with these bombs because pretty much Marshall just wants to, off them, so to say. So they kind of go out there with these bombs attached to them, and gotta have like, I guess, like kind of the closing parts where Nasha's on the ship, so she ends up attacking Ilfa, and is able to kind of rescue the last remaining creeper, and we see the marshal go out, and he's kind of gets, I guess, kind of coaxed into going out into the field to have this like big speech, like, he's a big shot, so he needs to have a big speech with these creepers. But Mickey 18, like in this whole kind of encounter, ends up sacrificing himself to kill him, kills the marshal, so it's just Mickey 17 that's left. And Nasha becomes the new leader, and that's just kind of how it ends, where they destroy the cloning device so there's no more Mickeys, and they kind of like this nice moment at the end where, he's finally Mickey Barnes. Now he's not Mickey in a number. So him, having the clone machine kind of destroy kind of, I guess, gives him his individuality back. So he's not like that anymore. But yeah, so I'm sorry. I realized I probably just like ran through that ending there, but there was just so much bizarre shit that was happening. It was just kind of all over the map.
Yeah, I mean, what you want to keep in mind is that the reason why the creepers attack is because they want their little baby back.
Correct.
Yeah. And they also, I think they also wanted one human killed for the one baby creeper that got killed.
Thank you. Yes. Sorry, I did skip over that. You're absolutely right. That was the ultimate plan there for that.
And it turns out the virus that they have been subjecting Mickey to, that was supposed to be the doomsday weapon they would use against the creepers.
Yeah, God, yeah, that shows how much, like I said, there was so much stuff being thrown at you at the end. It was kind of wild. So, but yeah, that was the end of it, and I don't know. I guess I'll give just some final thoughts about it. There was a lot of things that I was kind of surprised of with this. I felt like when you're kind of doing a movie like this, it makes sense to have this cloning process happen where Mickey 17 is the way he is, and then Mickey 18 kind of plays the stark contrast to him, because you can kind of get that Mickey 18 is kind of like the embodiment of who he wants to be, right? A more assertive character, maybe not as dark as Mickey 18 is, but I think there's probably aspects of his persona that, Mickey is trying to kind of personify. But something, I don't know, what was weird to me is I don't feel like they ever really showed like anything, I would say like a very strong, I guess, representation of him like really embodying what he went through. I felt like at the end, like he was still kind of like this meek character. I don't think you really, at the end of the story, had an opportunity to see him do a little bit more with that. There is kind of this like thing at the very end that we kind of see Ilfa and we kind of see that she's cloning Marshall's character, and there's some stuff that kind of happens there. But I don't know, it's kind of weird when you're thinking about, a character going through his kind of character story and his character arc. You would want to see the character have a little bit more, I would say, learn something from what he's gone through and what he's experienced. And I don't think the movie really gave us that. I think that there was like a lot of interesting things that they want to do, but I don't think the movie ever really got there. It just wasn't as well executed as some of his other films go. Like, I absolutely love Parasite. I thought that was just such a good movie, and I absolutely loved it. I would definitely urge people to check it out if you've not watched it yet. But I just feel like there's a lot of interesting things that they could have done, but it just didn't really feel like they fleshed it out well enough for me. The other thing is, and like I said, this part is obviously going to be very subjective to whoever's watching it. The comedy, I think, is going to be very hit or miss for people. And I think when you have a dark comedy like this, if you're not into that type of humor, I think it's going to, I think it's either you're going to look at it like, oh, that was, pretty amusing, or you're going to be like, that was really stupid. I didn't like any of the comedy at all. So I feel like that's going to be a big part of that. So I think if I had to give this a final grade, just to kind of give everything, I would probably give this like a 2.8 Mickeys out of 5. I do think there's parts of this that work, and I'm glad that I saw it, right? So even though I'm not going to out here and say like, hey, this is the greatest thing ever. It was something that was unique and different, which I really have to applaud, and I'm glad I gave it a chance. I just think that there was parts of it that could have been executed better that would have made this a better experience.
I mean, I would give it a 3.8 out of 5. I mean, I genuinely enjoyed the movie. I thought it was pretty funny. I thought the acting was great. I thought the visual effects were great, and I kind of, I mean, say what you will about the whole story. I thought at least it was trying something new and something different.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
I will also say too, the the whole interaction between the humans and the creepers. It's kind of reminiscent of a Star Trek episode called Devil in the Dark, where Captain Kirk and Spock, they visit a planet that is being attacked by a sort of lava monster. And they don't really understand what's going on until they discover that the miners have been taking the eggs and been destroying them. So that's the reason why the lava monster's been attacking. So you kind of see bits of it, bits of those elements in Mickey 17, which I thought was a nice callback to classic science fiction. Now to your point, is the humor subjective? Yes, of course. I mean, not everybody is going to laugh at that kind of the kind of dismemberment and violence that you see in this movie. But it's one of those things where you kind of have to understand that that as a satirical work, you have to understand that this is something that kind of pokes fun at at the current situation in which we're living in, and you kind of you almost have to detach yourself from from the senseless violence to see just how absurd things are, because it's one of those films where when you see the violence, you're understanding, yeah, it's a bit over the top, and yes, it's a bit disturbing, but at the same time, couple the fact that we're talking about a situation where they're set in space and they're living in a totalitarian society on a starship. You begin to see, well, you kind of have to laugh at the situation, because if you don't laugh at it, you're going to find yourself crying copiously, and then you're not going to be able to figure out what to do. So for me, it's one of those movies where I can just sit back and enjoy it for what it is, and not have to put too much thought into it. But yeah, that's my take on Mickey 17. Did you have any final thoughts at all?
No, I'm just surprised. Normally, I would say we normally discuss these things once we get out of the movie theater, right? I think, we typically see this with other friends. And it was kind of interesting. We didn't really talk or discuss anything about it afterwards. And I kind of looked at it like, okay, maybe everyone was just it was so bizarre. We didn't know what to say or talk about at the time. I didn't know how people, but it was interesting that you gave it such a high score, because I definitely didn't think that you would have liked it as much. And like I said, I don't want to sit here and say like I thought this was inherently bad or anything. I just felt like there's a lot of missteps with how they handled it. I definitely found humor in certain points of it. It just maybe is not as much for you. But yeah, I guess I was just kind of interested that you enjoyed it so much. So interesting.
All right, well, Lee, why don't you go ahead and take us out here?
Yeah, well, like I said, I appreciate everyone for listening to the two of us kind of banter as we kind of go through and discuss these types of things, and I'm definitely excited to see what the future holds for us. So please just go ahead and keep hitting all the buttons, the subscribe thing, and there's a bell thing. So just keep hitting all those buttons, and feel free to leave any things in the chat about what you think that the movie Pope and Luca will watch. So give us some suggestions.